Hello, Freedom Forgers. Hey, it's Patriot Gal here, and welcome to the Forging Freedom podcast and our Wisdom of Our Ancestors series. So happy to have all of you here. And, it's our mission to help you build your personal liberty one step at a time. So I'm glad you guys are all here tonight. Okay, let's see. Looks like we've got a few people watching here. We're excited to have Essential Mountain Homesteading in the house. And if you guys have not checked out his channel, you gotta go check it out. He is embarking on quite an adventure in the mountains of Idaho. So check his channel out. He is a very talented man with heavy equipment and carpentry skills and all of that type of stuff. Okay, so let's see. It says, "I wish I could get you guys talked into coming up and visiting us this fall. You know, you may not have to talk too hard, Essential." As soon as the husband gets home from a excursion that he's on, I'll talk to him about that. We absolutely love Idaho, and if we weren't here, we'd be there. So, all right. So today is Saturday, July 29th, and tonight we're going to continue our Wisdom of Our Ancestors series. And tonight I've got a real treat for you. We're going to be presenting a collection of letters that are titled Letters of a Woman Homesteader, and I think you're going to find it fascinating. So stay tuned and hang out with us. But first of all, I'd like to thank all of you who have been shopping through our Amazon link to buy the things that you need for your family and your homestead. You know, we don't make much of a commission on that, but it all helps and it keeps the channel up and running. And if you don't know how this works, let me just tell you, in the show notes of every live or recorded YouTube video on our channel, you'll find an Amazon link to our store and items that we use on the homestead. You can use these links to buy those things or anything else that you might need. And the best part is it doesn't cost you a dime extra to shop this way. We make a small commission and you get everything at the same price you would have if you went directly to Amazon. So this keeps the podcast coming to you week after week. So, again, thanks to all of you who have been doing that for us. So, let me just give you guys the weekly recap, tell you what's been going on here at the Forging Freedom Homestead. So, the young chickens now are about 5 or 6 weeks old. I think I may have said in a previous podcast that they were 8 weeks old, but it just seems like I've been feeding them that long, so I might have got confused on that. But they're about 5 or 6 weeks old, and they are completely feathered out. They no longer need the light now. And you know, it's fascinating. Every time I've ever bought chicks from, um, like Tractor Supply or in our area, we have something called IFA. It stands for Intermountain Farmers Association. I always have a few die. But this year, when I hatched out my own chicks, I have not had any losses whatsoever. I didn't help any of the chicks out of the shells. If they didn't make it out on their own, they just didn't make it. So I've got a real strong batch of chicks. I'm really excited about the strength. Hey, it looks like Homestead Tessie's in the house. Welcome, Homestead Tessie. I love watching her channel. She is such a talented woman. And if you want to see how, you can really do things off grid. She knows how to do things the old fashioned way. All right, so let me tell you with a few other things I've been dealing with. I've had a few maintenance issues here at the homestead. I don't know if I mentioned this to you guys, but my roof blew off in the spring. We had a microburst come through, and not the entire roof, but the entire edge of the south facing side. My house faces south. And so that first row of sheathing, so there are 4x8 sheets that go about 42 feet along the edge of the house. That whole section just folded up and sandwiched over on the rest of the roof. And so I had that happen. And you can see the rafters. Maybe I'll post a picture sometime, but you can see the rafters of my house. And of course, I had to call a roofer real fast. It was raining, and I had to get that thing battened back down temporarily. But been trying to get that roof fixed since that time, and I finally got that done today. But come to find out that when I originally had that roof put on, maybe I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, the guy who put it on did not use long enough nails to nail the sheathing to the rafters. So the nails he used were maybe only an inch and a half long, and they needed to be, almost 3 inches long. So that's why the roof peeled off, and I've been dealing with that. But I'm glad to have that done. But found out today that I probably need the other side now because there's some soft spots in that, and I was only planning on doing one half of the roof. So I'm just gonna have to, budget that in. All right, so let's get into the main topic of the show. So in a week or so, I'm going to go on a trip, and on my way, I'm going to go through a place that's called Burnt Fork, Wyoming. And, it's not much to look at. It's a beautiful part of Wyoming. It's got rolling meadows, and the Uinta Mountains are right there. And the reason I bring that up is because the series we're going to talk about tonight took place in Burnt Fork, Wyoming. And so every time I go there, I think of this woman that we're going to talk about. So let me get into it here. I'm just going to read the intro to you. And I'm not really sure who compiled this. I came across it years ago, and it's been really fascinating to me. So let me just read you this intro. It says, the writing of the following letters are from a young woman who lost her husband in a railroad accident and went to Denver to seek support for herself and her 2-year-old daughter, Jereen. Turning her hand to the nearest work, she went out as day as a house cleaner and laundress. Later, seeking to better herself, she accepted employment as a housekeeper for a well-to-do Scotch cattleman, Mr. Stewart, who had taken up a quarter section in Wyoming. And if you don't know, a section is, I believe it's 640 acres, so it would be a quarter of that. It says, the letters written through several years to a former employer in Denver tell her story of her new life in the new country. These are genuine letters and are printed as written, except for occasional omissions and the alterations of some names. All right, so this first chapter is titled The Arrival at Burnt Fork. It says, Dear Mrs. Coney, let me just back up. The date on this letter is April 18th, 1909. So just imagine yourself back there at the turn of the century. Dear Mrs. Coney, are you thinking I am lost, like the babes in the woods? Well, I am not, and I'm sure the robins would have the time of their lives getting leaves to cover me out here. I am way up close to the Forest Reserve of Utah, within a half-mile of the line, 60 miles from the railroad. I was 24 hours on the train and 2 days on the stage, and oh, these 2 days! The snow was just beginning to melt, and the mud was about the worst I've ever heard of. The first stage we tackled was just about as rickety as it could very well be, and I had to sit with the driver, who was a Mormon, and so handsome that I was not a bit offended when he flirted with me all the way, especially after he told me that he was a widower Mormon. But of course I had no chaperone. I looked very fierce, not that that was very difficult with the wind and mud as allies, and I told him my actual opinion of Mormons in general and particular. So it doesn't sound like she had a great opinion of Mormons, and that's okay. We've been called names before. It's all good. All right, meantime, my new employer, Mr. Stewart, sat upon a stack of baggage and was dreadfully concerned about something he called his, quote, tookie, unquote, but I'm unable to tell you what that is. The road, being so muddy, was full of ruts, and the stage acted as if it had the hiccups and made us all talk as though we were affected in the same way. Once Mr. Stewart asked me if I did not think it a, quote, gay-der trip, unquote. I told him he could call it gay if he wanted to, but it didn't seem very hilarious to me. Every time the stage struck a rock or a rut, Mr. Stewart would hoot until I began to wish that we came to a hollow tree or a hole in the ground so he could go in with the rest of the owls. At last we arose, and everything was just lovely for me. I have a very, very comfortable situation, and Mr. Stewart is absolutely no trouble, for as soon as he has had his meals, he retires to his room and plays his bagpipe, only he calls it his bug peep. It is the Campbells are coming, without variations, at intervals all day long, and from 7 till 11 at night. Sometimes I wish the Campbells would make haste and get here. There is a saddle horse especially for me, and a little shotgun with which I am to kill sage chickens. We are between two trout streams, so that you can think of me as being happy when the snow is through melting and the water gets clear. We have the finest flock of Plymouth Rocks, and get so many nice eggs. It sure seems fine to have all the cream I want after my town experiences. So even then, people didn't really like living in town. They liked being out there where they could be self-sufficient, or at least this lady did. So Jereen, that's her daughter, is making good use of all the good things that we are having. She rides the pony to water every day. I have not filed on my land yet because the snow is 15 feet deep on it. I think I would rather see what I'm getting, so we will wait till summer. They have just 3 seasons here, winter, July, and August. We are to plant our garden in the last of May. When it is so that I can get around, I will see the land and find out all I can and tell you. I think this letter is about to reach 30, secondly, so I will send you my sincerest love and quit tiring you. Please write to me when you have time. Sincerely yours, Eleanor Rupert. All right, so that is the first chapter of this, and it's kind of a short chapter. So I'm going to go ahead and read the second chapter, and we'll probably try to tackle 2 chapters every week, unless they're, really long. I'm going to just try to go until 6 o'clock Mountain Time, 8 o'clock Eastern, because the Homestead Mama is coming up on 8 o'clock, and I love her channel. I don't want to miss it, and I suggest that if you haven't been over there, you check it out too. She is very knowledgeable, especially about herbs and herbal remedies and things like that. All right, so chapter 2 is called Filing a Claim. So if you don't know, she is going to file a claim to homestead some ground. All right, May 24th, 1909. Dear Mrs. Coney, well, I have filed on my land and am now a bloated landowner. I waited a long time to even see the land in the reserve, and the snow is yet too deep, so I thought that as they have but 3 months of summer and spring together, and as I wanted the land for a ranch anyway, perhaps I better stay in the valley. So I have filed adjoining Mr. Stewart, and I am well pleased. I have a grove of 12 swamp pines on my place, and I am going to build my house right there. I thought it would be very romantic to live on the peaks amid the whispering pines, but I reckon it would be powerfully uncomfortable also, and I guess my 12 swamp pines can whisper enough for me. And the dandy thing is, I have all the nice snow, water I want. A small stream runs through the center of my land, and I'm quite near wood. A neighbor and his daughter were going off to Green River, the county seat, and said I might go along. So I did, as I could file there as well as the land office. I could file there as well as at the land office, and oh, what a trip! I had more fun to the square inch than Mark Twain or Samantha Allen ever provoked. It took us a whole week to go and come. We camped out, of course, for in the whole 60 miles there was but one house, and going in that direction there's not a tree to be seen, nothing but sage, sand, and sheep. About noon on the first day we came near a sheep wagon, and stalking along ahead of us was a lanky fellow, a herder, going home for dinner. Suddenly it seemed to me I should starve if I had to wait until we got where we had planned to stop for dinner. So I called out to the man, "Little Bo Peep, have you anything to eat? If you have, we'd like to find it." And he answered, "As soon as I'm able, it shall be on the table if you'll but trouble to get behind it." Shades of Shakespeare, songs of David, the shepherd poet. What do you think of us? Well, we got behind it, and a more delicious it I have never tasted. Such coffee out of such a pot. I promised Bo Peep that I would send him a crook with pink ribbons on it. I think he suspects that I'm a crook without the ribbons. The sagebrush is so short in some places that it's not large enough to make a fire, so we had to drive until quite late before we camped that night. After driving all day over what seemed a level desert of sand, we came about sundown to a beautiful canyon, down which we had to drive for a couple miles before we could cross. In the canyon the shadows had already fallen, but when we looked up we could see the last shafts of sunlight on the tops of the Great Bear Buttes. Suddenly a great wolf started from somewhere and galloped along the edge of the canyon, outlined black and clear by the setting sun. His curiosity overcame him at last, so he sat down and waited to see what manner of beast we were. I reckon he was disappointed, for he howled most dismally. I thought of Jack London's The Wolf. After we quitted the canyon, I saw the most beautiful sight. It seemed as if we were driving through a golden haze. The violet shadows were creeping up between the hills, while away back of us the snow-capped peaks were catching the last sun's rays. On every side of us stretched the poor hopeless desert, the sage, grim and determined to live in spite of starvation, and the great bare desolate buttes. The beautiful colors turned to amber and rose, and then to the general tone, dull gray. Then we stopped to camp, and such a scurrying around to gather brush for the fire and to get supper. Everything tasted so good. Jereen ate like a man. Then we raised the wagon tongue and spread the wagon sheet over it and made it a bedroom for us women. We made our beds in the warm, soft sand and went to bed. It was too beautiful a night to sleep, so I put my head out to look and think. I saw the moon come up and hang there for a while over the mountains as if it were discouraged with the prospect, and big white stars flirted shamelessly with the hills. I saw a coyote come trotting along and felt sorry for him having to hunt food in so barren a place, but when presently I heard the whir of wings I felt sorry for the sage chickens he had disturbed. At length the cloud came up. I went to sleep, and the next morning was covered with several inches of snow. It didn't hurt us a bit, but while I was struggling with the stubborn corsets and shoes I communed with myself, after the manner of the prodigals, and said, how much better that I were down in Denver, even at Mrs. Coney's, digging with a skewer into the corners of seeking dirt which might be there, yea, even eating a codfish, that I might perish on this desert of imagination. So I turned the current of my imagination and fancied that I was home before the fireplace and the back log was about to roll down. My fancy was in such working trim that before I knew it I kicked the wagon wheel, and I certainly got as warm as the most sought scientist ever read Mrs. Eddy could possibly wish. Not sure what all that means, but she's quite a poet. All right. After 2 more days, I arrived. I went up to the office where I was to file. The door was open, and the most taciturn old man sat before a desk. I hesitated at the door, but he never let on. I coughed, yet no sign. But a deeper scowl, I stepped in and modestly kicked over a chair. He whirled around like I had shot him. Well? He interrogated. I said, I am powerful glad of it. I was afraid you were sick. You'd looked in such pain. He looked at me for a minute, then grinned and said, he thought I was a book agent. Fancy me, a fat, comfortable widow trying to sell books. Well, I filed and came home. If you will believe me, the Scot was glad to see me and didn't herald the Campbells for 2 hours after I got home. I tell you, it's mighty seldom anyone's so much appreciated. No, we have no rural delivery. It's 2 miles to the office, but I go whenever I like. It's really the jolliest kind of fun to gallop down. We are 60 miles from the railroad, but when we want anything we send the mail carrier for it, only there is nothing to get. I know this is an inexcusably long letter, but it's snowing so hard, and you know how I like to talk. I am sure that Jerrine will enjoy the cards, and we will be glad to get them. Many things are a comfort to us out here. Um, let's see. Something came from a dear Mrs. Somebody. Baby has the rabbit you gave her last Easter a year ago. In Denver, I was afraid my baby would grow up devoid of imagination. Like all kindergartners, she depended on others to amuse her. But I was very sorry about it, for my castles in Spain have been real homes to me. But there is no fear. She has a block of wood she found in the blacksmith shop, which she calls her dear baby, a spoke out of a wagon wheel that is little Margaret, and a barrel stave that is bad little Johnny. Well, I must quit writing to you before you vote me a nuisance. With lots of love to you, your sincere friend, Eleanor Rupert. Okay, that is the end of the second chapter, and we will continue more next week. Got about 15 minutes here, and maybe we can just discuss a little bit of that story. I just find it so fascinating when people write their stories down, and I would encourage each of you, no matter what your life is like or what type of family you've got, to write your stories down. I mean, I'm sure Eleanor didn't think that all of us would be sitting down one night over an internet that she couldn't even imagine and discussing her letters and how valuable we would find them. So write your stories down. I think it's super important. All right, I'm going to get to the comments here and just see what y'all been talking about. I do these things alone. I don't have any helpers, so I can't look at the chat and read at the same time. So let's just go back and see what y'all are discussing here. All right. Tessie says she loves these stories, and Essential Mountain Homesteading says, go easy. It's best enjoyed in small dosages. Okay, so did you guys think this one was too long or not long enough? Let me know what you think. And let's see. Tessie says she is subscribed and will start binge watching tomorrow. That's great. I'm glad she's going to watch Essential Mountain Homesteading. That's great. Um, okay, let's see. Yeah, I'm glad you guys find these things interesting. So, yeah, it's been, the weather has been pretty nice here. It has kind of been it's been getting in the 90s, but mostly the mid 80s, and it's been very, very comfortable. And I've been enjoying myself. I've harvested all my garlic and got it trimmed. I've got some video coming out this week. I'm going to be out of town for a few days, but I've got some videos scheduled to drop into YouTube all this week. So you guys be paying attention and watching for those. And looks like we've got 5 people watching now. I appreciate you guys stepping in and watching and um, telling me what you think of this live stuff. This live stuff is not easy, you guys. You know, you're sitting here, like I'm sitting here. There's no one to really interact with except for when I interact with you on the chat. And so I'm sitting here in my office. I need to leave the door shut so the air conditioning can't really get in here, because if I left it open, you'd hear this giant whooshing sound. I actually don't have air conditioning. I have a swamp cooler. It's called a swamp cooler out here. It's also called an evaporative cooler. So for those of you that live in the very humid areas of the country, you wouldn't like a swamp cooler because it brings humidity into your house. But out here in the west, where it's very dry, a swamp cooler can be pretty much as effective as an air conditioning system, and it's much, much cheaper to use. So if you're going to live somewhere dry and let's say that you're going to go on solar, you can run a swamp cooler or an evaporative cooler for much less electricity than a air conditioning unit uses. So that's one reason we like our swamp cooler. Our power bill doesn't really go up that much in the summer. But I'm sitting here in this office, and I'm all by myself, and I'm looking at the screen, and looking at your comments. And so, once I get off script, it's a little difficult to interact and find things to talk about. But I think I'm getting better at this. For those of you that have been watching for a while, you probably have noticed a improvement. I'm not saying or duh as much as I did in the beginning. So I think I'm improving with every episode that I do. And so up here tomorrow, we've got, I don't know if this is happening in your area, but we've got a big bike race. I think it's called the America's, I don't know, it's a big cycling race. Pretty well known. They're going to be coming through here tomorrow. And it creates an absolute mess up here with traffic and everything else, and it turns our little farming community into a zoo. So I'm not looking forward to that. I'm thinking I might get up early in the morning and bug out of here for 24 hours and come back after all the craziness has subsided. But in the lead up to that, it's always craziness, because you've got all these people up here on bicycles practicing for this race. So there's bicyclists everywhere, go in front of you and coming at you, and they're just all over the place. And the roads up here, they're little country roads. They're not really wide roads. They're kind of have a steep shoulder, and so when another car is coming at you and you've got bicyclers on both sides, it's tricky, getting through there. So tell me what has been going on with you guys this week. What have you been up to? I think I've got a little bit of a lag going on. I'm a little bit behind in the comments. So tell me, you guys, what you have been up to this week. What's been going on? Just waiting for my screen to refresh here. I have I have internet. It's a satellite dish on the side of my house. It doesn't go to a satellite, but it points to some type of receiver up on the mountain or something like that. And so it's not cable, it's not fiber, and it's not satellite. It's some kind of a hybrid in between. But that is the only thing that's available here. I guess when you live rural, these are the kind of things that you have to, um, you have to put up with. So anyway, you guys, I am going to probably, if you guys don't have any questions, I'm probably going to sign off and wrap things up. But again, the Homestead Mama is coming up at 6 p.m. Mountain Time and 8 p.m. Eastern. And so you might want to go over and check her out if you haven't checked her out already. Um, Hang on one second. Technical difficulties. All right. All right, there we go. Anyway, Homestead Mama coming up at 8 p.m. Eastern. And again, I'd like to thank those of you who use our Amazon link in the show notes below to do your Amazon shopping. And again, it doesn't cost you a dime extra to help us out. So help us to continue to bring valuable content to you guys and improve the channel. And if you like what we're doing here at the Forging Freedom channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you won't miss an episode. And if you know somebody who likes this kind of stuff, please help us by sharing the channel with them. So thanks, everybody, and appreciate you stopping by. Have a great evening, and remember to go out today and do something to forge your freedom. Talk to you soon.